Thank you for being here. We wanted to welcome you to our presentation about Drummond Point Park improvements. The board has made a commitment in its strategic plan to Drummond Point Park, and that is good news for us. In addition, I wanted you to know that the Community Association has already allocated funds from our operating budget for 2013 and 2014 to cover the expenses. President Pines had mentioned at the annual meeting this year that the revitalization of the community's common properties was a priority for us. And indeed, that's true. And that's why we're leading off with this project as the first of several that you will be seeing as we roll along. This April at the Strategic Planning Workshop, we were pleased to have 60 participants. And we learned quite a bit at that time. John Cotner, architect John Cotner, who is here today to give the presentation, led that discussion. There were several key concepts that I want you to be aware of that were brought up at that meeting. First of all, we want this park to be multi-purpose and multi-generational. Second, we want a park that preserves the natural environment because we all believe that that is critical, particularly here at Amelia Island Plantation. And third, we want improvements that are reflective of latest advances in park and playground facilities, because we're always considering, what is the next generation interested in, and what will the next generation of members of the Community Association be considering. So today, I'm pleased to say that architect John Cotner is here to explain how the design is developing so far based on the feedback from members that we've already received, as well as what occurred at that April planning session. Following John's presentation today, we'll have plenty of time for you for questions and answers, so I want you to be sure and get those questions ready. So John, I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Thank you, Joe. Pleasure being here today. It's been a few months. We made a lot of progress, but yesterday we went through this a little bit, went through the presentation of how we got from zero blank sheet of paper to where we are today. But one of the things we touched on, but we didn't really talk about it too much, was the process. I think that's important to just take a minute to say how things have evolved over the years. Some of you may know I've been doing projects here for 33 years. And the old style was, is you form a committee and that committee decides what you're going to do. You formulate a concept or schematic, and basically at that point, the ship would leave the dock. In this particular case, we took a different approach, and I think it's a healthy approach for the overall community, in that before that ship left, the hypothesis was drawn of here's what the committee and I as a design professional envision for this park, but rather than assume that we are ultimately correct, we went back at our town hall meeting and asked for input. Say, are we heading in the right direction? Are we making mistakes? What do you like? What don't you like? What images that we're presenting to you here make you feel good and you think work well for Drummond Park? So I think it's important to preface the whole thing by, I think the process that's been that we've been through the Drummond Point, I think sets a good example for some things moving ahead. It does make it inclusionary. It's not a select group producing something. And like I say, the ship isn't leaving the dock until there's a consensus building and everybody's had a chance to speak their piece. So I think that was just a little thing that I thought was important to share. With that being said, we walked away from the town hall meeting. Like I said, we put together this hypothesis of what we thought could work at Drummond Park, presented it to the community at large. The feedback was generally pretty positive, at least I felt it was. But what we were able to do is, based on the exercises we went through that day of character and painting the picture of what we want Drummond Park to be, we were able to come away with some pretty valuable feedback. We tabulated that feedback, went back to the committee, reported, okay, here's the consensus on these different items that we discussed. Here's a direction that seems to be a fairly clear consensus. And Once we reviewed that and got a little bit more input from the committee, then we went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and tried to hone in on the individual components of the park, the design elements of the park. And there's a few, there's not a lot of those, but there are a few of them. Some of it's furnishings and so forth, which is pretty cut and dry. But the design elements were pretty interesting in that Drummond Park is pretty unique. To have a piece of land like this is unique for any community association. Basically, what came out of that meeting was the overall organization pretty much passed the test. That parking was going in an area that was already disturbed, easily accessible. It's a good way to get utilities in and out to bath facilities and that sort of thing. So we aren't disrupting the natural perimeter by coming in here. The multi-purpose, after discussion was concluded, it's probably good to stay where it is with improvements. As you go through here, here's the playground, pretty much in the same place it is again, so it doesn't disrupt much. The green area stays. So at the end of the day, these improvements are not really obtrusive. They're going to blend in with what's already there, the footprint that's already been established, so to speak. And then up at the point of the visual point or focal point of the green area was the pavilion with bathrooms and so forth. And let me explain what the rationale of putting the bathrooms there is that the theory is that we want to have bath facilities in close proximity to the users. The users here are in the park. They're not down here on Seamarsh Road. They're up here, playground, picnic, gaming, and that sort of thing. So the theory is if you're going to have functional bathroom facilities, they ought to be in fairly close proximity to the users. That's the theory of that. It is a little further to get there, but there is a cleared route existing to get there with relatively small disruption. This plan, by the way, disrupts very few trees. We got a few down here in the parking area, but most of this is already cleared. As you know, the playground area is already there. That's under a tree canopy, so this plan will respect that. And this area, there's a couple small scrub oaks and so forth in the area where now there's the mosquito control enclosure, roughly in that area. So that gives you a little bit of feel where it is. So at this point, this is a design development stage that we're in right now. At this point, this goes from a conceptual site plan to a key plan. So now we say, okay, we've identified where things go. Now we need to get into the nitty-gritty of what more specifically is that, is that, is that, is that, is that. So that's where we're going to go now. First one, logically, would be an entry gazebo. And you saw images of sundry different gazebos that we produced at the town hall meeting and workshop. The one we had then, in very, very rough conceptual form, was a little heavy, we felt. And we're not trying to make the architecture speak, but we're trying to fit it in there. And again, be as unobtrusive as possible. So this is the entry to the park. So when you pull in, come around the loop, this is what you enter through to go on into the green area of the park. So it's a stick style, fairly contemporary, modernistic, kind of clean line. We got some cables in there supporting very light benches. The benches do have backs. That's one of the feedback items we got at our town hall meeting. We do have some cover in case it rains. I mean, this is really a place for people to just relax or wait to pick up a ride, call the tram, that kind of thing. But it's wood with metal roof. Very simple, clean line, and durable. What we did, a lot of people were saying, well, where does it go? What does it look like in place? So we snapped some photos of that general vicinity and placed that image on here so you can see more clearly what kind of setting it's sitting in. So that's a Photoshop image of taking the photo and you overlay the SketchUp, this is the SketchUp, that's the photo, obviously. And that's what it looks like. So it's there, it blends in pretty good. I mean, it's not a temple or anything like that, but hopefully it's a low-key, classy entrance into the park. The youth playground. This is one of the more interesting parts of the puzzle, because we spent a lot of time collecting data on what this needs to be. This particular area we talked about doing predominantly for the 2 to 12 year age group, and that's a pretty wide range. So how do you get enough diversity and interest there to keep somebody occupied for a while? When you start looking at the prefab products out there, so to speak, we looked at imported stuff from London, or from England, excuse me, United Kingdom, which was great looking stuff, but sort of off the chart. And then we looked at the more typical plastics, which really don't fit the character of Drummond Park. And so there's a lot of stuff out there, but it seems to go either way far to the right or way far to the left, and there's not a whole lot in between. So after a lot of discussion, a couple different meetings with the committee, they said, well, maybe it looks like maybe we ought to just design the playground. So they said, can you design a playground? I said, yeah, we can design a playground, which is sort of fun because you can think like a kid. So with that being said, we set out to design a playground. And then part of the balancing act here is try to create enough activity and interest, both visually and activity-wise, but also try to make it a safe place where you don't have to worry about broken heads or arms. So this is a structure, a series of components that is built predominantly of wood products. And we have talked about treated wood, or we've heard some other comments about redwood and cypress and so forth. Treated wood is the most durable. Redwood, you might as well build it out of walnut because redwood is very expensive and environmentally probably not the best product to use these days. Cypress would be a second choice. But the wood would all be eased edge, so it's all routed. You don't have hard, sharp edges. Use carriage bolts, so all your connectors are countersunk and smooth, so kids don't get caught up on them. But the idea was to make this sort of an adventure kind of playground where a lot of different things can be going on at the same time. What you see over here, you come up on this little platform. This is a little kid's zip line, and it's a dish that zips on a cable, and you pull it back, and they can go down the zip again. It's not a dangerous thing. It is a manufactured item. So what you're seeing here is some of these components, the slides, the zip line, and some of the climbing devices, we buy those as components and plug them into the wood structure. So there are some manufactured products here. But the idea was to get this to where it felt like a tree house, playful, whimsical, but yet had a lot of different activities going on. Here's a little suspension bridge. So you come up here, you zip in here. On that other side of that, there's a ramp going down with the ropes, which you'll see is all rotated around. A little suspended bridge on cables. Slide this way, slide that way. And then there's a pole in there to also slide down the fireman pole style. Below here, in these little cavities below, we tried to utilize these spaces down in here so that for kids who can't deal with the physical aspects of climbing, they still got activities to do. There are little playhouses and that sort of thing that are in that first layer below the platforms. You can see over here balancing, a low balancing. This is 2 feet off the ground now. So you have a rope and kids can walk out. We're probably going to add a platform on the end so they can come back, loop around. Over here, rings and climbing bars. And then just some fun stuff, accessories. You can see the climbing over here, again, the balance. The ramps, we try to use a fair amount of rope where we can to keep kids as you go up that ramp. You put the ropes in there so as they go a little higher, the ropes go a little higher, and we can keep them from falling off and hurting themselves. The structure itself, we tried to, you'll see as we progress through this, there's sort of a common theme. Here you see the rope climbing device here. You see a common theme of architecturally, I think, a fairly whimsical, organic kind of motif that keeps coming through with these different structures. And there again, you can see the lower platform, upper platform, steps, ramps, slides, zip line again. We will add accessories in here. The kind of things kids can get occupied with. Captain's wheel, a bell, different play devices like that, which again would be purchase items that we'd plug in to this overall scheme of things. This is another sort of overall from the other side. So they can literally run up this end, go through the experience, come down the slides, come down the pole, come back, come down the other ramp. We think there's a fair amount of potential for activity there. And I think as relatively safe as you can be on a playground. Second or the third item were the shelters, gazebos or shelters. On this one of the things that came out through discussion both at the town hall meeting and subsequently with the committee was we had originally planned on 3. We planned on one here, and one up here on the northern viewing platform. It was deemed that these were good because they're on the upland areas. This one out here was clearly in the wetlands, and the plantation historically has not allowed roof structures in the wetlands. So rather than set a precedent, we've nixed that covered area and just gone with a deck with benches, but no roof. That helps us in some ways when we get down to the bottom line on the budget, because we cut out a gazebo, that means we can spend it someplace else. So these again, you can see, now you see some of this stuff going on up here with the roofs and some of the elements down in here. That stick style again that I explained sort of ties back into what you saw on the playground. So there are similar elements that are floating from one object to another. We did put the benches on the backs on the benches. The walkways, by the way, when we did our site survey out there, one of the big comments was accessibility. What we've depicted here is going to a 5-foot versus some of those out there now are 3 to 4 feet. So we've proposed going to a 5-foot wide walkway with curbs to prevent somebody from rolling off, or if they have vision problems, they can feel those curbs and not walk off into the marsh. These are roofed again. It's sort of part, you can see here better, it's sort of part arborish, but yet you still have some protection from rain or sun. And those would be, as I said, if you go back, one here at the playground, watch over the kids, one out here on the point to watch the sunset. Again, all natural wood products, stainless steel, some cabling again, which gives it that little bit of a nautical feel about it. But very simple lines, transparent, see-through. And here again, Photoshop those in to a couple areas that are similar to where these would be placed. It's hard to pinpoint them exactly. And some of this stuff really isn't going to get actually pinpointed to the actual foot until we get out there and stake them out in the ground. But we're pretty close on these. Then we go to the pavilion. The pavilion, this is, like I said earlier, where we would house a men's and ladies ADA bathroom. And by the way, this path, here's ADA parking and bike rack before you get into the entry gazebo. And this whole path here is accessible. So at a minimum, that getting up to the playground, getting over to getting to all the main venues would be accessible routes. So it would be stabilized coquina and wood walkways, a combination. So we get to the pavilion, kept it real simple per our discussions. We basically got a storage room with a mop sink, a women's, a men's, stair up to an observation, some picnic tables, a couple grills. We used to have a fire pit in there. Based on feedback, we eliminated the fire pit. The one thing you'll notice on the presentation is we don't have the benches, the backs added to the benches yet, but they will be there eventually. Very small footprint. You can see the roofed area encompasses an area that's 40 feet long, and this area out here is 20 feet wide. So we're not talking about a big structure here. It's not going to be this thing that's going to be screaming at you out there. It's going to settle into those trees right on the edge of the trees at the end of the green. We did confirm that if we put this slab about 2 feet above grade, we'll get a good view between the understory and the tree canopy. And by only going 2 feet, we can bring in a little fill, mound it up, and then we can get a 1 in 20 slope, accessible slope, without rails and so forth, to get from the green up to the pavilion. So you won't have a bunch of handrails, and it won't look accessible, which is the goal, is make it look like it was just a good design, but we haven't had to do a switchback ramp and everything with handrails to get there. So we've tried to make it pretty easy there and hopefully attractive. Again, you see the theme is continuing with the overlapping roof planes, almost an arbor trellis kind of approach with the roof elements, thin below. Keep it as transparent as possible, just enough to house the storage in the bathrooms. But at the same time, with these roof elements, try to create ventilation and shade and protection from the elements. That's the whole goal of having it. This kind of facility, it's the kind of thing we designed to handle maybe 20 people, that type of number, for birthday parties, picnics, just family gatherings. It's not for catering and all that kind of stuff. So it's strictly for convenience of the residents going to visit Drummond Park and maybe cook out at the most. Metal roof again. Go up to the top. We did do a little pretty good sized observation platform up there. You could probably 8 people could stand up here at one given time. And we did go out there and just checking with going up the ladders the distance we could, engaging the canopy. There's some very good, let me back up a second. There's some fairly good vistas out to the north and here to the west. It's already there's natural dips in the tree canopy there. So that we think with a little bit of pruning, possibly in those 2 corridors and the understory, just cleaning up from the palmetto to the first major growth of some of those smaller scrub oaks out there, we can get good vision from the pavilion platform, but also from the observation tower above. And there are the viewing glasses, the old style viewing glasses, so you can look out to the river. If we can find, I'm sure we can find one. And some couple just park grills. Bring your charcoal, no gas or anything like that, just park grills. And this is the side facing west. Little different angle. So real simple concept. It is a modernistic approach, but I do think it's consistent with the old design with nature philosophy that was really where we started here at the plantation through the Sea Pines Company, is try to get it to blend in a little bit, be comfortable. It's a little quirky maybe, but this is a special place. It's not like any other place on the plantation, so we felt it warranted a little different character, a little more organic. Budget. This shakes out to be about $600,000. As Joe already said, it is a budgeted line item. So at this point, the board has basically 3 directions to give us. One is proceed and get this ready to bid. Looks good to us. We think we're heading down the right trail. 2, we think there's some areas that need to change, but generally we're heading in the right direction. Let's make those changes and get it out to bid. Or the 3rd option, which I certainly hope doesn't happen, is everybody pulls the plug and says abort mission. But I don't suspect, I would be very disappointed if that happened. But that's the goal come Friday, is we've solidified our direction and can march on towards the finish line, so to speak. We've gone back, we ran a budget back. It was actually July of last year when we started this process. Some stuff has shifted a little bit back and forth like any budget. So I suspect that this budget will shift yet again, or again, or again. As the numbers, as we get this thing priced, some of these things are going to move around a little bit. What we will do when we bid this project is we'll ask for a menu, basically, from our bidders that's going to say, okay, rather than say, give us so many lineal feet of coquina walkway, what is the cost per lineal foot of walkway? So then we can say, okay, here's some things that we must do, and if we have to pull back, we'll know in case of the wood walkways, the coquina walkways, or we say, okay, well, we'd like to do 2 gazebos right now, but we can only, I mean, we'd like to do 3, but we can only do 2. We'll have those items line item, so we can cherry pick, if we will, the items that's going to ultimately fit the bottom line. You can see most of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. We have footage of fences, pavilions, and a lot of your cost per units here aren't that low because durability is an issue. So, you know, if we're going to use aluminum, stainless steel, high grade, like we won't use number 2 pine, for instance. We'll use number 1 pine because it just is much better. It'll last longer and you don't get the splinters. So we're inherently using products that are going to be slightly higher than what one would consider average. Most of this stuff down through here, clearing, parking. We do have pavement at the ADA parking space. We do have 2 in there currently. I think we had about 24 spaces, if my recollection serves me right. Millings is one that you may not know what it is. That's it's granite spoils, and they grind them up, and you put them over lime rock, so it gives you a fairly stable, accessible surface. It's very good for driving. It compacts well because it's angular. It's not a round gravel. It's an angular type of crushed granite. So it bonds real good and it keeps a nice level surface over time. I actually have that on my parking lot at my office, and it's been there for, I guess, close to 10 years now, and it's still solid, and it doesn't move around. So that's what millings are. We got a lot of coquina here. A bunch of coquina. When we started doing the takeoffs, I mean, it's 700 cubic yards of coquina on the property. That's a lot of coquina. But by the time you spread 2 inches of coquina over stabilized lime rock, it adds up real quick. Some basic things, some signage, erosion control, what you got to do. Wood walks, again, we noted to be 5 feet, so we bumped from our old budget to this budget, that number went up. Repair the wood walkways, we bumped that up a little bit. The rest of the utilities, water, sewer, you will notice that the sewer is a fairly high number on the overall scope of things. And I explained yesterday that we did explore very early on the possibility, do we tie in to the domestic sanitary, or do we do a septic system? And it was determined that it probably wasn't the right thing to do to put a septic system out there. So you bite the bullet, you tie in, and you pay the tap fees one time, and you'll have less maintenance problems down the road. In fact, I looked at one this morning where it just doesn't work. All this rain, it has nowhere to go. So I think you made a wise choice there, but it is a line item. So when that went up, those numbers had to be taken from other areas. But when you add all that up, you're just a hair under 600. I rounded it to 600, and that was the budget.
All right, any questions? Jackie?
You talked about a mop sink in the pavilion.
Yes.
And regular, like Weber grills. Will the mop sink be big enough so people can clean the grills?
No.
No. Thank you.
Here's the problem, is the grills, for various reasons, what we're proposing is the typical park grill, which is a pedestal, it's heavy gauge steel, so the grates they're fixed. So you can't remove the grate. It's not that it wouldn't fit in the sink, but you can't get them off. So we're trying to keep it secure, but the mop sink is there just for somebody be able to clean up afterwards. Maintenance.
All right, somebody over here, yes.
Question and comment. Does the treehouse go? And the comment is, in all of your design, kids with golf carts will find a way to find their golf cart on a 5-foot walkway. Can you make sure in the design that they can't get their golf carts through this?
Okay, so the comment is make sure
I
that
know,
kids
but you
can't get
go
through
on the
on your
bike
golf
path
carts
sometimes.
on the 5-foot
We'll
walkways.
take care of that.
All right, John.
The golf carts. Well, first of all, the golf carts. Now, what we are proposing, well, like I said earlier, it is 5 feet overall, but then we've got a 4-inch curb on either side. To be quite honest, I'm not sure you can get a cart in less than 5 feet. I would be surprised, but they could ride the rails, I suppose, which could be interesting. So I would say to that one, what we've done in other cases, we just put a bollard, a 4x4, or something like that, centered so that you pedestrians can go. What we got to watch again is accessibility. We don't want to preclude accessibility for somebody that has a small automatic cart, wheelchair. But typically those can be maneuver in about 3 to 4 feet. But I'd really like to keep an aisle there of at least 4 feet for accessibility. And a cart will not go through 4 feet. That was the one question. The other question was treehouse. We're recommending, and this was a very early discussion here, and is to try to recapture the feeling of a treehouse without maintaining a treehouse that we feel at this point probably isn't safe. You got a living tree here, and quite frankly, today we wouldn't take that same approach in building a treehouse because we wouldn't have nails and screws and lags and everything else going in the tree because it's going to damage the tree. It probably already has. But what makes it more difficult is maintaining it, because as that tree moves, which it's going to do, you go out there, the day we went out there, there were probably 2 or 3 balusters off the guardrail up there that were pulled loose, and it's because of the movement. So the feeling was that it's a very romantic notion to keep it, but with the status of the ladder, the platform, the guardrails, the roof is in pretty bad disrepair. It was probably best to replace that with the viewing tower and with some of the elements in the youth playground area.
Yes, over here.
Yes, since this is a custom playground,
Yes.
plus custom design, are there any safety regulations or legal implications with the ropes on the ramp? Because I could just see a little one putting his head through the ropes and then tripping off the ramp. But I know with any kind of pull strings on drapes and that, there are a lot of regulations. Is there an issue with that on this?
Playgrounds are not regulated like the building code is regulated, for instance. I mean, as an interior designer or as an architect, we have regulations. If we're doing a commercial structure or residential structure, we have to adhere to these certain regulations that the state or the federal government prescribes in terms of accessibility and that sort of thing. We have yet to find, and we've searched pretty hard, yet to find any agency that regulates playgrounds. Now, there are some recommended leaflets, if you will, out there by the federal government and others that would tell you, well, don't use toxic woods, don't use this, don't use that. But they don't really get into the design elements. You really, unfortunately, you really have to get into common sense and try to look around the corner and say, what could a kid do here? How could he hurt himself in this one, in all these different little venues that you've got in here? What's jumping up as a red flag? You know, most playgrounds will have netted climbing devices. Can a kid slip off of there and get caught up? Yeah, probably. We are going to go through this and go through with a fine-tooth comb and try to make sure at any of the climbing areas we've got grab rails so that when they get up to the top of the ladder or the top of the ramp, they have something to grab a hold of to stabilize rather than going through the rail. The rails are a real problem because when we started out, and I'll go back, when we started out, When we started out here, for instance, I said, well, let's use the net. And I said, no, wait a minute, we can't do a net there. Kids will be climbing up the net and then falling off the top. So we have to use vertical ropes in this case because they can't climb the vertical ropes. And, you know, you come down here, it's the same thing. You know, what are you going to do? You can only, and I go back to the old statement that I made yesterday and sundry other times with the committee. I said, do people go to parks because they're the safest place to go? Probably not. They go there because they're fun, and yes, a kid's going to get scraped, and they're going to get a splinter, and they're going to get a bruise. Hopefully with parents' attention, and that's the key, parents and grandparents paying attention to those kids that are there, you don't have somebody get hurt. But to design a playground where it's bulletproof, I don't think you can do it. I don't think it can be done. I don't care whether it's plastic, wood, stainless steel, unless you give them just a flat playing field with grass, that's the only one that's going to work.
Well, that leads to the question, should there be a sign posted that you're at your own risk kind of thing, like the beach if there's no lifeguard or something?
I think that's probably why, and that's up to council to probably, you have a few here that might give you some advice on that. I'd like to put a disclaimer on here, you know, like the very same thing, you know, regarding the designer, that the designer will not be held liable for any stupid moves that anybody makes out here. But you know, somebody's going to do it. I mean, somebody is going to get scraped up. It happens in every playground. By the way, and I sort of skipped over a couple of points in the playground while we're talking about that. There will be some more conventional elements in here as well as the custom adventure playground. There will be some swings, little spinning devices in the toddler area. There'll be a dish swing type of thing, and some stepping stones, logs type of things, just balancing kind of things. So there will be some stock items that we're going to pull off the shelf and mix in with the custom elements. I wish I had a better answer for that, but I don't. Sorry.
Don, in the front row.
The existing walkway and sitting area and to the northwest, I believe it is, where you go out into the marsh, is there any changes being made to that, or will that continue to be there, or what happens to that?
You're referring to this platform here, Don? The game plan there is to refurbish the walkway, refurbish the platform, install benches similar to what we've depicted there in the gazebos. The only difference is there won't be a roof on it. But there are pieces over here that are in very bad disrepair right now and really are unusable. So
that be upgraded?
Yes, most definitely. That's probably one of the worst areas right now for disrepair. There are some other areas back here extremely unsafe. By the way, while we're talking about safety and liability, that old real estate platform that's put up there on the west side, that's precarious at best. I mean, the ladder is like this, the treads are like that, and there's no handrail. And the guardrails don't meet code. So would I recommend you leave that there? No. No, that needs to be gone. It worked to view condos out on the beach temporarily, but as a permanent solution, not a wise thing. So thus the gazebo out there to replace the one that is in really bad shape.
Do you have a projected start date and a projected finish date?
Well, I think the committee would like to start tomorrow. But the target that we've got on the schedule right now would be to try to turn a shovel on this late this year to early next year. Late this year, quite frankly, is ambitious because of the bid process, negotiations, and so forth. Because at this point, like I say, we're looking for a go-ahead to get the bid documents ready, which will hopefully happen here on Friday. If that happens, we kick it into high gear, get the bid docs out. It'll probably take 30 days to get the bids in, do all the required paperwork, make a recommendation to the committee of here's who we think is appropriate to build this facility. Time frame, that came up yesterday, and we haven't spent a whole lot of time on a construction schedule because so much of it depends on who is employed to construct it. If it's a smaller residential builder, for instance, well, first of all, let me back up. I recommended yesterday, and I would still recommend it, this is not a job for a small residential builder. This needs to be somebody that has a commercial license because they know the ins and outs of commercial construction, and this is considered, being a community facility, is a commercial facility. So it needs to be somebody that's licensed to do that type of thing, because you do have to deal with ADA, grading of walkways and so forth to meet codes that the residential guy doesn't necessarily deal with every day. So it should be somebody commercial. If it is somebody commercial in the light commercial area, I would guess from the turn of the shovel to the last nail being driven and the paint drying, it will probably be a period of 6 months. Maybe 4. We could probably find people to do it in 4, but I'd say 4 to 6. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of downtime because a lot of this, certain areas can be cordoned off while the work is being done, so the majority of the space can be used on a daily basis. Just have to have cordoned off areas right in the immediate work area.
Do you have any idea who your prospective bidders might be for contractors?
We have not talked about specific builders. I would suspect that this would not be, at least I would again recommend, that it not be a public bid invitation, that this would be an invited bid invitation to certain individuals who we've had past experience with and we feel are qualified to do the kind of work that's expected here. That being said, there are some contractors that have done work here historically and have had good success that I think we could lean on, and the ones I'm referring to do have commercial licensing capabilities. So it's not, this is not the kind of project for a Manhattan, but it's not the kind of job for a guy working out of his pickup truck either. So it's that group in the middle, the smaller, the Alden Whites and the Dickie Smiths and people like that here in close proximity, but not necessarily here strictly on island, but close by.
All right, if there are no other comments, and I don't see any, we wanted to thank John Cotner for being here today.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, good work.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here today. We hope that you'll keep us posted.